The sterile corridors of the Galactic Agricultural Authority starship Vigilant gleamed under harsh fluorescent lighting, a stark contrast to the weather-beaten agricultural hold of the human colony ship Hallowed Ground. Captain Elena Reyes stood with her feet planted firmly on the deck, arms crossed over her chest, as if physically blocking the path of the inspection team. Beside her, sitting with unnatural stillness, was Titan, a massive black and tan Pitbull whose muscular frame seemed almost mechanical in its precision. "You understand the regulations, Captain Reyes," Inspector Varun Holt said, not looking up from his datapad. His thin frame was draped in the pale green uniform of the authority, with insignia that glinted under the harsh lighting. Class C bioorganisms are strictly regulated in interstellar transit. Elena's weathered face remained impassive. 20 years of ranching on 3 different colony worlds had left her skin leathery and her patience for bureaucracy non-existent. "Titan isn't a bioorganism, Inspector. He's my dog." The inspection team, consisting of Holt and 2 junior officers, exchanged glances. One of them, Lieutenant Mara Walsh, a woman with close-cropped silver hair and kind eyes, stepped forward. "Captain, we understand the emotional attachment, but regulations exist for reasons of galactic biosecurity." Titan's ears pricked forward at the tension in the voices, but a subtle hand gesture from Elena kept him seated. The dog's eyes, unnaturally intelligent, tracked every movement of the inspection team. "Show me where in your regulations it says a colony defense animal falls under Class C restrictions," Elena challenged, her voice carrying the dust of distant worlds and the authority of someone who had survived their harshest conditions. Inspector Holt finally looked up, his expression a mixture of exasperation and rigid determination. "Captain Reyes, our scans indicate genetic enhancements well beyond standard domestication parameters. Enhanced musculature, reinforced skeletal structure, cognitive implants. This is not merely a dog. He's a working animal. Every colony ship has them." "Not like this," Holt replied, turning his datapad to display a scrolling list of biomarkers and anomalies. "Your Titan exceeds Class C limitations in 17 distinct categories, the most concerning being neural enhancement patterns consistent with military-grade battle companions." Elena's jaw tightened. "Hallowed Ground is an agricultural colony vessel. We grow crops on inhospitable worlds. Titan helps us manage the environment and protect our people." "From what, exactly?" Holt pressed. "Whatever we encounter," Elena replied flatly. The tension in the air thickened. Outside the viewport, the vast blackness of space was punctuated by the massive, weathered hull of Hallowed Ground, a converted cargo vessel now home to 300 colonists, their hydroponic gardens, and the beginnings of a new human settlement on the frontier. Lieutenant Walsh cleared her throat. "Perhaps we could discuss a specialized permit." "That won't be necessary," Holt interrupted, tapping his datapad decisively. "This organism requires immediate confiscation and evaluation. If it proves to be within acceptable parameters after laboratory assessment, it can be returned." Elena's hand dropped to Titan's head, fingers curling protectively in his short fur. The dog leaned slightly against her leg, a living support beam. "That's not going to happen, Inspector." "I'm afraid you don't have a choice," Holt replied, his voice dropping into the formal cadence of official procedure. "Under Galactic Agricultural Authority Statute 447B, I'm officially requiring the surrender of the biomodified organism designated Titan for immediate quarantine and assessment." Elena's gaze flicked to the exit, then to the junior officers, assessing. "And if I refuse, then I will be forced to summon Enforcement Squad Beta," Holt said, his finger hovering over a communication panel on his wrist. "I would rather not escalate this, Captain." The smallest of smiles touched Elena's lips. "So would I, Inspector." She looked down at Titan, whose eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that suggested more than mere animal devotion. "But you're going to have to find him first." With a barely perceptible nod from Elena, Titan was suddenly in motion, a blur of muscle and purpose. Before any of the inspectors could react, the dog had slipped past them and through the automatic door, which opened and closed with suspicious timing. Security breach in Section 17A, Holt shouted into his communicator as alarms began to wail throughout the Vigilant. Lock down all corridors and prepare for retrieval of an escaped Class C organism. Elena leaned against the bulkhead, her posture deceptively relaxed. You know, Inspector, Titan's not just genetically enhanced, he's smart, real smart, and he doesn't like being called an organism. Holt's face flushed with anger. This is a serious violation of at least 15 different statutes. If your animal damages authority property or personnel, then you shouldn't have threatened to take him. Elena cut in, her voice hardening. Titan is family to us on hallowed ground. He's kept our children safe from predators on 3 different worlds. He's pulled people from burning buildings. He's more than the sum of his genetic modifications. Regulations exist for a reason, Holt insisted, his fingers flying over his datapad as security alerts cascaded across the screen. The last time unregulated bioenhanced organisms spread between systems, 3 colonies were devastated. Titan isn't a plague, Inspector. He's one dog. One dog with the potential intelligence of a 7-year-old human, the strength of 3 men, and genetic adaptations that could disrupt entire ecosystems if introduced carelessly. Holt countered. Now, are you going to assist in his retrieval, or shall I add obstruction to the list of violations? Elena pushed herself away from the wall. I'll help you find him, but only to make sure your enforcement squad doesn't hurt him or themselves. The corridors of the Vigilant had transformed from quiet inspection zones to a hive of frantic activity. Emergency lighting pulsed in rhythmic patterns as security personnel in blue uniforms rushed past, weapons drawn. Elena walked casually beside Inspector Holt, her eyes scanning each intersection and maintenance hatch with practiced ease. Your animal couldn't have gotten far, Holt said, checking the security feeds on various panels they passed. This vessel has state-of-the-art containment protocols. Elena suppressed a smile. I'm sure it does. They rounded a corner to find a security team crowded around an open ventilation shaft, the grate neatly removed and set aside. Lieutenant Walsh was there, directing a scan of the inner duct. Any sign of him? Holt demanded. Walsh shook her head. Biosigns are confused by the environmental systems, sir. We're getting anomalous readings from multiple decks. Elena stepped forward, examining the duct. He's not in there anymore. And how would you know that? Holt asked suspiciously. Because Titan wouldn't choose such an obvious route, Elena replied. He's trained to evade predators much more dangerous than your security teams, Inspector. Holt's communicator chirped. He listened briefly, his expression darkening. It seems your assessment is correct, Captain. We've lost visual coverage in sections 22 through 26. Something has disabled the security cameras. That would be Titan, Elena said, unable to keep a note of pride from her voice. He doesn't like being watched when he's working. Working? Walsh asked. Securing his territory, Elena clarified. Standard procedure when he feels threatened. Holt's face flushed deeper. Lieutenant Walsh, summon Enforcement Squad Beta immediately. Full tactical gear, non-lethal restraints, and Class C sedatives. Walsh hesitated. Sir, if the animal is as enhanced as our scans indicate, standard sedatives might... I'm aware of the risks, Lieutenant. Holt snapped. But I will not have a military-grade bioweapon loose on my vessel. He's not a weapon, Elena interjected, her casual demeanor slipping for the first time. He's a companion and protector. A distinction without a difference when it comes to 17 genetic modifications outside regulatory limits. Holt replied tersely. Now, Captain Reyes, if you would kindly call your animal before this situation deteriorates further. Elena leaned against the corridor wall, crossing her arms. I can't do that, Inspector. Can't or won't. Titan responds to a specific neural pattern, Elena explained, tapping her temple. It's part of his protective programming. Once he's in security mode, only direct physical contact from me or another colonist from hallowed ground can reset him. Convenient, Holt said dryly. And if I were to place you under arrest until your animal surrenders? Elena smiled thinly. Then Titan would consider me in danger and switch from evasion to active defense. I don't think you want that, Inspector. Before Holt could respond, the corridor lights flickered ominously. A moment later, all the display panels in the vicinity went dark, then rebooted with warning symbols flashing. What's happening? Walsh asked, her hand moving instinctively to the stunner at her belt. A technician monitoring a portable terminal looked up, his face pale. Something's interfacing with the environmental systems, sir. We're seeing power fluctuations across decks 3 through 7. Holt rounded on Elena. What is your animal doing to my ship? Creating options, Elena replied calmly. Titan's neural implants allow him to interface with basic systems. Nothing dangerous, just enough to ensure he can navigate and protect himself. This has gone far enough, Holt declared, turning to the security team. Lock down all maintenance access points, deploy sonic deterrents in the affected sections, and Captain Reyes, he added, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. If your animal harms anyone on this vessel, the penalties will extend far beyond confiscation. The penalty for deploying a weaponized organism against Authority personnel is 20 years in a deep space containment facility. Elena's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. Then you'd better hope your people don't corner him, Inspector, because Titan doesn't distinguish between harm and the threat of harm, and right now, your entire crew represents a threat. As if to punctuate her statement, the lights flickered again, and a distant alarm began to sound from deeper within the ship. Sir, a technician called from down the corridor. We've got movement in the reactor conduit access tunnels. Holt pointed at Elena. You're coming with me, Captain. And you're going to call off your animal before this becomes a diplomatic incident between the Authority and your colony. Elena pushed away from the wall, her movements unhurried. Lead the way, Inspector. But remember, I warned you. The reactor conduit access tunnels were a maze of narrow passageways bathed in the blue-white glow of emergency lighting. The air was thick with the ozone smell of electrical systems and the underlying hum of the Vigilant's massive power core. Elena and Inspector Holt moved cautiously, followed by Lieutenant Walsh and 2 security officers in tactical gear. Your enforcement squad is late, Elena observed, noting the absence of the specialized team Holt had summoned. They're taking up position at the other access points, Holt replied tersely. We're going to ensure your animal has nowhere to run. That's not a good strategy, Elena warned. Titan doesn't respond well to being cornered. Walsh glanced at her curiously. You speak as if he has complex reasoning abilities. He does, Elena confirmed. His cognitive enhancements were designed for independent operation in hostile environments. He can make tactical decisions, assess threats, and adapt to changing circumstances. That's precisely why organisms like him are regulated, Holt interjected. The potential for unpredictable behavior? There's nothing unpredictable about Titan, Elena interrupted. His behavior follows clear patterns based on his primary directive, protect the colony and its members. And yet here he is, causing chaos on my vessel. Holt retorted. Because you threatened to separate him from his colony, Elena pointed out, from his family. The group fell silent as they approached a junction in the tunnels. Ahead, the passage widened into a control hub where multiple conduits converged around monitoring stations. The displays flickered with diagnostic data, some showing clear signs of interference. Walsh raised a hand, signaling the group to stop. Movement ahead, she whispered, pointing to a shadow that shifted against the far wall. Holt raised his communicator. All units converge on Section 42C, Reactor Control Hub, target located. Inspector, Elena said quietly, let me go in alone. I can bring him out peacefully. And give you both a chance to escape? I think not. Holt replied. He unclipped a specialized restraint device from his belt, a circular collar with glowing blue nodes. We'll proceed according to protocol. As they entered the control hub, the shadows coalesced into a distinct form, Titan sat calmly in the center of the room, his posture alert but not aggressive. His dark eyes reflected the emergency lighting, giving them an almost supernatural glow. "Titan," Elena called softly. "It's okay, boy." The dog's ears pricked forward at her voice, but he remained seated, his gaze fixed on the weapons held by the security officers. "Remarkable control," Walsh murmured. "He's waiting for instructions." "Of course he is," Elena replied. "He's not a mindless beast. He's evaluating the situation." Holt raised his hand, revealing the restraint collar. "This ends now. Your animal will submit to proper containment and evaluation." Titan's posture shifted subtly, muscles tensing beneath his short coat. "Inspector," Elena warned, "put that away. He recognizes containment technology." "All the more reason to secure him immediately," Holt insisted, taking a step forward. What happened next occurred with such speed that the human eye could barely track it. Titan launched himself not at Holt, but at the control panel behind him. His massive paws struck the surface with precision, triggering an emergency shutdown sequence. Simultaneously, the lights throughout the section flickered and died, plunging the hub into darkness broken only by the red glow of emergency beacons. When the backup systems engaged seconds later, Titan was gone, and so was Elena. "Lockdown," Holt shouted into his communicator. "Full vessel lockdown. The animal and Captain Reyes are attempting to escape." A computerized voice echoed through the tunnels. "Warning. Reactor stability compromised. Initiating safety protocols. All personnel evacuate sections 40 through 45. Containment procedures initiating in 10 minutes." Walsh looked at her scanner in alarm. "Sir, the reactor cooling systems are cycling erratically. If they fail..." "That's impossible," Holt snapped. "The safety systems have redundancies." "Apparently not against whatever that dog did to the control panel," Walsh replied, her voice tight with concern. "We need to evacuate these sections immediately." Holt's face contorted with frustrated rage. "Find them! Now!" Elena moved swiftly through the maintenance shafts that ran parallel to the main reactor conduits, Titan padding silently beside her. The dog's enhanced senses guided them through the darkness, avoiding security teams and automated systems with uncanny precision. "You didn't have to crash their reactor systems," Elena muttered as they paused at a junction. "That's going to make things worse." Titan looked up at her, his expression almost apologetic. I know. You were protecting us," she conceded, running a hand over his blocky head. "But now we need an exit strategy before that inspector gets someone killed trying to find us." A distant commotion echoed through the shafts, the heavy footfalls and equipment sounds of Enforcement Squad Beta deploying into position. Elena peered through a ventilation grate into a wider corridor where 6 officers in specialized tactical gear were checking weapons and scanners. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with dark skin and a stern expression, addressed the team. "Remember, this is a Class C organism with military-grade enhancements. Standard restraints may not be effective. If sedatives fail, you are authorized to use lethal force." Elena felt Titan tense beside her. She placed a calming hand on his back. "Easy," she whispered. "We're not fighting our way out of this." She studied the enforcement officers, noting their equipment and formation. Among them was a familiar face, Lieutenant Walsh, now outfitted in tactical gear but looking distinctly uncomfortable. "There's our opening," Elena murmured to Titan. "The lieutenant has doubts. We can use that." The computerized warning continued to echo through the vessel. "Warning. Reactor stability at 82%. Evacuation of non-essential personnel recommended." Elena made a decision. She reached into her pocket and retrieved a small device, a colony communicator used by the ranchers of hallowed ground. With swift movements, she keyed in a specific sequence and slipped it through the ventilation grate. The device clattered to the floor of the corridor, immediately drawing the attention of the enforcement squad. As they approached cautiously, it activated, projecting a holographic message. Elena's face appeared above the small device. "This is Captain Elena Reyes of the colony vessel Hallowed Ground. I'm broadcasting this message to prevent unnecessary casualties." The current reactor instability is a defensive measure, not an attack. It can be reversed, but only if I have your guarantee that my companion will not be confiscated. The squad leader picked up the device, examining it warily. This could be a trap. It's not, Sergeant Corps Val, Walsh said, recognizing the name tag on his uniform. I've been observing Captain Reyes. She's trying to prevent escalation. By threatening our reactor? Corval asked incredulously. By creating a situation where negotiation becomes necessary. Walsh countered, the dog, Titan, he's not just a pet or even a standard working animal. He's integrated into their colony structure. Taking him would be like removing a critical crew member. The hologram of Elena continued. I'm willing to surrender myself to inspection protocols if Titan's status can be properly reevaluated. Lieutenant Walsh has seen his behavior. He's controlled, intelligent, and poses no biosecurity risk to your vessel or any habitable world. Corval hesitated, then raised his communicator. Inspector Holt, we've received a message from Captain Reyes. She's offering terms. Holt's voice crackled through the communicator, strained and furious. There will be no negotiation with someone who has deliberately compromised the safety of an authority vessel. Find her and the animal immediately. Elena, watching through the grate, exchanged a glance with Titan. This wasn't going as hoped. The warning system updated its status. Reactor stability at 76%. Evacuation of all personnel from sections 40 through 50, now mandatory. Containment protocols initiating in 8 minutes. Walsh stepped forward, her expression resolute. Sir, with respect, we don't have time for a prolonged search. The reactor systems are deteriorating. Then find that animal and shut it down, Holt demanded. That won't solve the reactor issue, Walsh countered. Whatever Titan did to the systems, we need Captain Reyes's cooperation to undo it. There was a tense silence, broken only by the persistent warning announcements. 2 minutes, Holt finally conceded through the communicator. You have 2 minutes to establish contact and begin negotiations. After that, lethal force is authorized. Elena had heard enough. She pushed open the ventilation grate and dropped into the corridor, startling the enforcement squad. Before they could raise their weapons, she stood with her hands raised. Where's the animal? Corval demanded, his stunner trained on Elena's chest. Safe, Elena replied calmly, and he'll stay that way until we have an agreement. Walsh stepped forward. Captain, the reactor can be stabilized, Elena finished for her, but I need guarantees. The sound of hurried footsteps announced Inspector Holt's arrival. He burst into the corridor, his uniform disheveled and his face flushed with anger. Captain Reyes, you are under arrest for sabotage, endangerment of authority personnel, and violation of at least 23 biosecurity regulations. Elena remained unperturbed. The reactor will reach critical status in approximately 7 minutes. Inspector? After that, containment protocols will seal off this entire section, with all of us inside it. Now, do you want to arrest me, or do you want to save your ship? Holt's jaw worked silently, his internal struggle evident on his face. Sir, Walsh interjected, I recommend we hear her terms. Fine, Holt spat. What do you want? Titan remains with me, recognized as an essential colony security asset with proper documentation. Elena stated, no confiscation, no laboratory assessment. In return, we stabilize your reactor and depart peacefully. Absolutely not, Holt began, but was interrupted by a new warning announcement. Reactor stability at 70%, containment protocols initiating in 6 minutes. Corval shifted uncomfortably. Sir, we should consider... This is blackmail. Holt cut in. I will not be coerced into violating clear regulatory protocols. Elena shrugged. Then evacuate your people, Inspector. Titan and I will find our own way back to hallowed ground. And leave a compromised reactor that could potentially destabilize this entire sector of space? Holt challenged. I think not, Captain. This has become a matter of authority security, not merely agricultural regulation. The standoff lingered, seconds ticking away as the warning system continued its countdown. The tension in the corridor was palpable. Weapons still trained on Elena as she stood calmly amid the chaos she had helped orchestrate. Finally, Walsh stepped into the space between Elena and Holt. "Sir, I have a suggestion. Regulation 742F allows for special dispensation for unique biological assets critical to established colony functions. That regulation applies to specialized crop strains, not dangerous animals." Holt objected. "The language doesn't specify, sir." Walsh pressed. "It refers to biological entities essential to colony operations. If Captain Reyes can demonstrate that Titan serves such a function—" "He does," Elena interrupted. "Titan has saved 17 lives during our colony's establishment. He's detected environmental toxins our equipment missed. He's driven off predators that threatened our children. Without him, we lose not just security, but an early warning system for threats our technology can't always identify. Reactor stability at 65%, containment protocols initiating in 5 minutes." Holt's resolve visibly wavered. "Even if I were to consider such an exemption, there would need to be documentation, assessments, proper chains of authority, all of which can be handled after my ship isn't about to lock down its reactor section with your personnel inside," Elena pointed out reasonably. The inspector glared at her, then at the warning lights flashing along the corridor. "This sets a dangerous precedent. So does letting a reactor destabilize over regulatory inflexibility," Elena countered. 4 minutes to containment protocols. Holt's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "Lieutenant Walsh, note in the official record that under emergency circumstances, provisional exemption is granted to the biological entity designated Titan pending full review by authority headquarters." "Thank you, Inspector," Elena said, genuine relief in her voice. She raised her hand to her mouth and produced a distinctive whistle. 3 sharp notes followed by a longer tone. Seconds later, Titan appeared at the far end of the corridor. The enforcement squad tensed, weapons tracking the dog's movement, but he approached with deliberate calm, his gaze fixed on Elena. "He won't harm anyone unless they threaten me," Elena assured them, kneeling to greet her companion. "Now, let's fix your reactor before we all get sealed in here." Under the wary eyes of the enforcement squad, Elena and Titan made their way back to the reactor control hub. The dog moved with uncanny precision to the console he had previously interfered with, placing his paws on specific sections as Elena guided him through a sequence of commands. "His neural implants allow him to interface with standard systems," Elena explained as they worked. "It's how he helps us diagnose equipment problems on hallowed ground." "Another modification outside regulatory parameters," Holt muttered, but without his earlier vehemence. The warning announcements began to change. Reactor stabilization sequence initiated, stability at 72% and rising. Containment protocols paused pending system recovery. Relief visibly spread through the gathered personnel. Walsh approached, watching Titan with newfound respect. "I've never seen anything like him," she admitted. "The level of control, the intelligence behind his actions." "He's one of a kind," Elena agreed, scratching behind Titan's ears as he completed the stabilization sequence. "Designed specifically for our colony's needs." "And who exactly designed these modifications?" Holt inquired, his professional curiosity momentarily overriding his frustration. Elena's expression grew guarded. "Various specialists. The details are in Hallowed Grounds Colony Charter, which I will be reviewing thoroughly," Holt assured her. "This provisional exemption doesn't mean the end of my investigation, Captain." "I wouldn't expect it to," Elena replied, "but it does mean Titan stays with us where he belongs." As the reactor systems returned to normal parameters and the emergency lighting faded back to standard illumination, the tension in the air gradually dissipated. The enforcement squad began to stand down, holstering weapons and powering down specialized containment equipment. Corval approached Elena as she prepared to leave with Titan. "That's quite an asset you have there, Captain," he said, eyeing the dog with professional assessment. "Military applications would be significant." Titan isn't a weapon, Sergeant, Elena replied firmly. He's a guardian. There's a difference. Tell that to the equipment he disabled, Corval said with a hint of grudging respect. We'll be finding pieces of our containment nets throughout the lower decks for weeks. Elena smiled faintly. Consider it a lesson in the limitations of containment technology when faced with loyalty. As they made their way back toward the docking bay, where hallowed ground awaited, Inspector Holt fell into step beside Elena. His earlier fury now tempered into something closer to academic interest. You understand that this incident will be reported to authority headquarters, he said. Your colony's exemption may be temporary. And you understand that colonies like ours exist on the edge of explored space. Elena countered. We face threats your regulations were never designed to address. Titan isn't just a pet or even a working animal. He's an adaptation. Our answer to environments that would otherwise kill us. Holt was silent for a moment, considering. There are reasons for the regulations, Captain. The Procyon incident was caused by careless corporate terraforming, not companion animals. Elena finished for him. I know my history, Inspector. The difference is that Titan isn't replicating or spreading through ecosystems. He's one dog, protecting one colony. With modifications that could be replicated, Holt pointed out. Only by someone with the same specialized knowledge and equipment, Elena said. And those aren't exactly common on frontier worlds. They reached the docking bay where representatives from hallowed ground waited anxiously. A small crowd had gathered, concerned by the alarms and rumors of confrontation. Among them were children who brightened visibly at the sight of Titan, calling his name with obvious affection. Walsh watched as the dog's demeanor transformed from vigilant guardian to gentle companion, allowing the children to embrace him while maintaining a protective stance. It's remarkable, she said quietly. The transitions between different behavioral modes. He knows his people, Elena replied simply. And they know him. Inspector Holt observed the reunion with complex emotions playing across his features. The regulations weren't designed with relationships in mind, he admitted reluctantly. Maybe they should be, Elena suggested. The frontier isn't just about resources and expansion, Inspector. It's about building new homes, new families, including the non-human members. Holt straightened his uniform, regaining some of his formal demeanor. I'll include your perspective in my report, Captain. But I make no promises about the authorities' final determination. Fair enough, Elena conceded. In the meantime, we have worlds to cultivate. As Elena and Titan prepared to board hallowed ground, Lieutenant Walsh approached with a small data chip. Your provisional exemption documentation, she explained, handing it to Elena. I've included my personal observations about Titan's behavior and control parameters. It might help with the review process. Elena accepted the chip with a grateful nod. Thank you, Lieutenant. Not everyone sees beyond their regulatory parameters. The regulations exist for good reasons, Walsh said, unconsciously echoing Holt's earlier sentiment. But they're meant to protect life, not hinder it. You're Titan. He's clearly life worth protecting. With final farewells exchanged, Elena and Titan boarded their colony vessel. As the docking clamps released and hallowed ground prepared to continue its journey to the frontier, Inspector Holt stood at the viewport, watching the weather-beaten ship with thoughtful eyes. Sir, a technician approached hesitantly. We've completed the preliminary damage assessment. And, Holt prompted, not looking away from the departing colony ship. Most systems are functional again, but we're still finding pieces. Pieces of what, exactly? The technician shifted uncomfortably. Our equipment, sir. The containment nets, scanner arrays, even parts of the environmental control systems. They've been distributed throughout the ventilation system, very precisely. A warning, Holt murmured, more to himself than the technician. Sir? Nothing, Holt replied, finally turning away from the viewport. Document everything for the official report and add a notation to Colony Vessel Hallowed Grounds file. What notation, sir? Holt considered for a moment, then allowed himself a small, bemused smile. Mark their biosecurity status as approach with caution, guardian present. As hallowed ground accelerated away from the Vigilant, Elena stood in the observation deck, Titan at her side. The massive agricultural spaces of the colony ship sprawled below them, hydroponic gardens, soil cultivation areas, and the beginnings of portable ecosystems destined for their next frontier world. That was too close, she said to Titan, who leaned against her leg in silent agreement. A voice called from behind them. Captain, is it true you crashed the authorities' reactor systems? Elena turned to find a small gathering of colonists, their expressions a mixture of concern and barely suppressed excitement. Not crashed, she corrected. Just renegotiated their operational parameters. Laughter rippled through the group, followed by stories eagerly shared about Titan's previous exploits defending the colony. The dog absorbed the attention with dignified tolerance, only his gently wagging tail betraying his pleasure at being among his people again. Later, as Elena filed her official report in her quarters, a message notification appeared on her terminal. It was from Lieutenant Walsh aboard the Vigilant, marked personal rather than official. Captain Reyes, it began. Our recovery teams are still cataloging the redistributed equipment throughout the Vigilant. Sergeant Corval asked me to inform you that several pieces of our most advanced containment technology have yet to be located. He seems to think your Titan may have archived them somewhere for future reference. While officially this is concerning, unofficially, impressive. The enforcement squad has developed a new appreciation for colony defense systems. Safe travels to you and your remarkable guardian, Lieutenant Walsh. Elena smiled, glancing at Titan, who dozed peacefully in the corner of her quarters. Good boy, she murmured. Very good boy. The dog's ear twitched at her words, his sleep momentarily lightened by her praise. In the gentle rise and fall of his breathing, there was no hint of the formidable intelligence and strength that had confronted the full might of authority regulation and prevailed. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past as hallowed ground continued its journey to the next world in need of cultivation. Carrying with it not just seeds and soil and human determination, but also something the regulations had failed to categorize: the bond between a woman and her dog, between a colony and its guardian, between the known and the frontier. Inspector Holt would file his report. The authority would debate their regulations. But Elena knew that some connections transcended bureaucratic categories, and that the next time anyone tried to separate Titan from his people, they might not find all the pieces of their equipment or themselves. The reactor incident aboard the Vigilant had proven once again what the colonists of hallowed ground already knew. Regulations were necessary, but adaptability was essential. And sometimes, the most effective adaptation walked on four paws and responded to the name Titan. As the colony ships sailed onward through the vast emptiness of space, Elena rested her hand on Titan's sleeping form, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. Together, they had faced the rigid structure of galactic law and found a way to bend it without breaking, much like the frontier colonies themselves, carving out spaces of humanity in the unforgiving void. Next world will be better, she promised him softly. Fewer inspectors, more open spaces. Titan's eyes opened briefly, intelligent and trusting, before closing again in contented sleep. The message was clear. Wherever they went, whatever challenges arose, they would face them together, woman and dog, captain and guardian, a family unit that defied simple classification. And that, Elena reflected as she turned back to her report, was precisely what made them so effective. And so dangerous to those who lived by checklists and regulations alone. In the morning, they would begin preparations for their next planetfall. There would be soil samples to analyze, atmospheric conditions to assess, potential threats to identify. Titan would be central to it all, his enhanced senses and intelligence providing insights no machine could match. But for now, in the quiet of her quarters, with the distant hum of the colony ship's engines providing a soothing backdrop, Elena allowed herself a moment of simple gratitude for the companion who had once again proven his worth beyond any regulatory classification. "They tried to confiscate you," she whispered to the sleeping dog. "Poor fools never stood a chance." And somewhere in the depths of the Vigilant, a recovery team stumbled upon yet another perfectly dismantled piece of containment technology, meticulously disassembled and arranged in what could only be described as a warning, or perhaps a promise, of what awaited those who threatened the bond between a human and her Pitbull. The rumor spread quickly throughout authority vessels. "Approach the colony ship Hallowed Ground with caution. Their guardian sees beyond regulations, moves faster than security protocols, and leaves messages that require no translation." When Hallowed Ground reached its destination 3 weeks later, a new note had been added to its official classification in the authority database. Carries Class C biological entity with provisional exemption. Non-standard diplomatic protocols advised. Elena would have laughed if she'd known. Titan would have simply wagged his tail and continued his watch over the people who were, regulations notwithstanding, his to protect. For on the frontier, bonds were formed not by bureaucratic approval, but by shared survival, shared purpose, and a loyalty that transcended species. And in that space beyond the reach of comfortable regulations, Titan wasn't just a dog, or even just a genetically enhanced guardian. He was family, and family, as Inspector Holt had reluctantly learned, was not something to be confiscated, even with all the enforcement squads in the galaxy at your disposal. The pieces of equipment scattered throughout the Vigilant stood as testament to that simple truth. Some bonds cannot be broken without consequences. Some loyalties run deeper than obedience to distant authorities. And some dogs, when threatened, leave messages that outlast the confrontation itself. Hallowed Ground continued its journey, carrying humanity's hopes for new worlds and new beginnings. And padding quietly through its corridors, alert and vigilant, went the most fearsome guardian the frontier had ever known. A Pitbull named Titan, whose loyalty had faced the test of authority regulation and emerged, like the colonists themselves, unbowed and unbroken. The stars beckoned, new worlds awaited, and Elena knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges those worlds presented, they would face them together, captain and companion, human and dog. A team that defied easy classification but embodied the very spirit of frontier colonization, adaptability, resilience, and bonds stronger than any regulation could contain. For in the space between stars, on the edge of explored territory, it wasn't regulations that ensured survival, it was relationships. And the relationship between Elena and Titan had proven itself stronger than the full might of galactic authority, which was, perhaps, exactly why the regulations existed in the first place. But that was a philosophical debate for another day. For now, there were worlds to cultivate, and a ship full of colonists who slept more soundly, knowing their guardian walked the corridors, his enhanced senses attuned to their safety, his loyalty as certain as the stars themselves. And if the authority came calling again, well, they might find their equipment. Eventually. Most of it, anyway. The pieces that mattered,